George, how you doing?
Well, as we were just chatting, this is a morning where I wish that I could just go back to bed because everything went wrong out of the gate. Dogs were just driving me crazy. Could not get them to walk with me.
They got a mind of their own. Mine's at the top of the stairs right now, whining because he's too nervous to come down the stairs. So,
we have two dogs. One is blind, and the other one's autistic.
oh, okay.
So
you
try
really have a
walking.
struggle. Yeah.
So try walking a dog that you have to keep guiding back onto the path, and the other one that keeps saying, "Oh my God, I'm afraid of a berry. Oh my God, I'm afraid of a leaf."
Yeah. Good luck.
All right. So you and I were chatting the other day, and we always get hit with these common questions. So I think we said let's put together some of these common questions, and we'll just start tackling them. So I'm going to throw the first one at you.
Perfect.
All right, Bill. Here's a question that comes up, I'd say frequently enough. And that's how much money do I need before my closing to account for things like just the initial deposit, the insurance, the inspection, the appraisal, everything prior to closing.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few costs that do happen before closing. The inspection, which is not part of what I calculate. So it's very important to know that when I'm talking to, someone and I say, yeah, the total cost for this is probably going to be $12,000. I don't know what the inspection costs. So that's not a part of my calculations, but you do need to pay for an inspection beforehand. The appraisal is something you will pay for beforehand as well. That should be $500 to $600 depending on the property. That goes on a credit card or debit card. It's factored into my figures, but you pay it prior to closing. Deposit, that's a percentage that you choose, based off of the purchase price, usually 1% to 2%. You have to have that ready to go in your checking account or savings account. We have to see that you have that money before, I can give you a pre-approval. I have to see that you're going to be able to make that deposit. And those are the big ones. There might be some small things along the way tied to inspections maybe, but on my side, it usually all comes in at the end. Everything is one lump sum at the end.
So if you were going to say to a buyer, because a lot of times what I hear from buyers is they say, George, what do I need to close? Okay. And I always try to say to them, well, here's everything that you're going to encounter. But, talk to Bill, for example, and he's going to give you that breakdown. So I didn't appreciate the fact that you don't include inspection costs as part of your estimated closing costs. That would make sense because it's technically not part of closing. It's prior to. So yes, it is about $500-$600 depending upon the package or the inspector that they use. Radon tests, water quality tests, wood destroying organisms, so termite, pest tests. Those are above and beyond. For most inspectors, they will do that as additional. A lot of home inspectors are adding other things on the packages. So the package goes. I've seen some packages go for as much as $1,200. Yeah, and those are, but also square footage plays into inspection. And if it's a multifamily, it plays into inspection. So I'm glad to know that you're not accounting for that during the closing costs because this is a variable, but I will make sure that I communicate that better to others. You talked about deposit being 1% to 2%. Absolutely accurate. We encourage buyers to put more like 2% because it just shows intent of purchase. But then that's applied to their down payment at closing, correct?
Correct. Yep. That gets held in an escrow account, usually by the selling side's attorney, and it all goes into your final closing figures.
Okay. I usually tell people, just for simplicity's sake, that it's being applied to the down payment because they may get credits to cover some of those closing costs.
Absolutely.
We won't get into that topic right now.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
All right. Okay.
Well, so kind of building on that, my question for you, which we just had recently, how quickly does the deposit check get cashed?
Okay. So deposit checks, so there's actually deposits have to be, okay, let me back up for a second because how quickly they get cashed should be within 1 to 2 days of receipt. I'm going to underscore should. Because the issue with the check, so when we write an offer, okay, Bill, let's say you're writing the offer, all right? One of the things that we provide is a photo, okay, of the check. Because we have to show evidence of the check being prepared, that the buyer has completed it, because it's part of what we submit as an offer. It's not a requirement. It's preferred. It's what tells an agent, okay, they're ready to go. When no check's included with the offer package, we don't get told, oh, sorry, can't submit. But there are some agents who say, hey, listen, I really need to see the check so I can show the seller that you have a complete offer package.
Yeah.
So the reason why I explain that is because when the check comes over, I then have to get the check. So if your offer is accepted, so Bill, you wrote an offer on this house for $250,000. You put in a 2% deposit, so that's $5,000. You wrote the check to the seller's brokerage because brokerage is holding escrow. In that case, the offer gets accepted. I call you up and say, Bill, I need the check. If you're not living nearby, like you're out of state, as I'm working with some people in California right now, okay,
Yep.
then that check has to be sent overnight priority to an address that I give them, okay, whether that be the brokerage office or my home office, so that it can then be delivered in person to the brokerage, because we have to have evidence of the check in hand. Once it's in the brokerage hands, they're supposed to deposit it within 48 hours. So the example that you gave a minute ago, they lost the check.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
So what ended up happening? The buyer wired the funds to the seller's attorney because the seller's attorney was holding escrow. So you could actually skip the whole check deposit thing if you are prepared to do a wire of deposit, but then there's no way to show evidence of it. So sometimes you end up just burning checks just for the sake of process.
Yep.
But it should be within 48 hours.
And I'll throw the addendum in there that's important because we have to see that the check was deposited and the money left your account. So that's why that's important, is we have to see as a lender that the money left your account.
So even if it's a wire transfer, then you need to receive the wire transfer.
Yep.
So either you need the photocopy of the check from me, okay? So like when we put in an offer and we get it accepted, I send you a copy of the check, or I send you now a copy of a wire transfer. I think wire transfers may start becoming, I don't want to say the norm, but I think for certain buyers, they're just going to go through that process, because writing the check and, if you're writing 6 or 7 offers before getting accepted, burning those checks feels painful.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised too if something else pops up. I mean, Zeely and all those are so, Venmo, that's all so popular now. Maybe that's going to happen.
I'm sure there's a famous real estate app that's thinking about how to do exactly that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. All right. So got a question for you. All right. I had a buyer who asked me the other day. So here's question number 2 for you. I had a buyer ask me a question the other day, which was about their credit score being pulled. Okay. Because we talked about the difference between pre-qual and pre-approval and blah, blah, blah. And they said, I just don't want to go and have my credit pulled because I know that's going to hurt my credit.
Okay. So yes and no. If you are getting your credit pulled multiple times within a short time frame, couple weeks, and it's all for the same item, then that's called shopping for credit. That's shopping. So if I pull it and another lender pulls it, another lender pulls it in a short time frame, you're only really dinged once for that pull.
So hold on. So even if it's different lenders, so let's say I'm the buyer and I call you and 2 other lenders, and all of you are trying to work to see if you can give me a pre-approval. You're each pulling my credit score, but for the same purpose. So my credit score is going to get hit, but only technically one time.
Yeah, it shouldn't get hurt because you are shopping for the best deal. That is a good thing. So the credit bureaus should not be penalizing you for shopping for the best deal. Now, if you are, there's a whole thing with the CFPB right now, but if you are getting your credit pulled for a mortgage and a car loan and a couple different credit cards, your score is going to drop more because now they're seeing that you're trying to take on a lot of different debt at once, and your score could drop a little bit more significantly. If it's just me or me and another lender and it's all just for a home loan, your score might drop a couple points. It should pop up again in 30 to 60 days. And the good thing is what I pull is the higher score. It's not the lower score. So if your score drops, 5 or 10 points, my credit report is good for 90 to 120 days. So by the time I pull again, it'll be back up.
Okay. So let's say we're working with a buyer, like we have a number of them who've been looking in this market for an extended period of time. In some cases, it's been because of personal reasons. They've had to put things on hold. But I have one buyer. It's 483 days now, I think, is the metric on them in terms of looking for a home.
Yep.
Now, I know we've put in offers multiple times during that period. If you've had to go through and redo your pre-approval or anything of that nature, have you gone and pulled their credit? Would that not then, because the 90 days is passing for them?
Yeah. So I can each time. I like to ask your credit report, once you build up a good credit history, should be pretty durable and shouldn't change much. If you don't miss payments, if your balances are about the same, it shouldn't change much. And that's another thing too, is if you don't have a big credit history and I do a credit pull, the effect will probably be greater than if you have a longer credit history, multiple trade lines. Me doing a credit pull is probably not going to affect you much. Your score should be pretty durable at that point. But yeah, so I'll ask the borrower, is anything changing in your income, assets, or credit? Send me an updated pay stub. Tell me, what does Credit Karma show you right now for your credit score, which is not a perfect barometer. But if their Credit Karma has always been 800 and they're telling me it's 800 and we're just putting in this offer and I haven't spoken to them for, 6 months, then, I'll leave it up to them. I like to do the credit pull though, because I don't see it hurting people's scores very often.
Okay. So that's something that it comes up. I think I'd say probably every third buyer I talk to asks the question about credit.
Yep.
Because I think it's generally misunderstood. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I would agree. All right. Let's see. For you, sir, what happens if there is something major that needs repair during inspection?
Well,
plumbing, electrical.
That has happened,
roof.
Actually. Okay, so trying to think of the address is not relevant. Okay. So most inspections, we know going in because we've done the walkthrough on the house. Okay. We've gone through the house. We've seen everything. So for most houses, we have a pretty good sense of what we're going to see on the inspection. So for example, if we walk up and we see that the front screen door, when we open it, is tilted and falling off, we know that's going to get noted on the inspection. Unless the seller is planning to repair it that afternoon, it's going to come up. If we walk through the house and we see that there's a window that's being held up with a piece of wood, well, then we know that window probably is a non-functioning window. And if you take the wood out, it's going to come slamming down. That would come up on inspection because inspectors check everything. They check windows, outlets, switches, everything. But if we we're going through and doing showings and we don't see any major disrepair, unless it's a house that's distressed, of course. But if we don't see any major disrepair and then we show up for inspection, as I did for one, there was a leak in the roof. Okay. So at inspection, we went up, we were going through one of the bedrooms and there was a staining on the wall. And the staining was not there when we had done the showing, which the showing had been done just, I think, 3 or 4 days prior. We were able to scramble on getting inspections done. So we talked to the seller and we it was in the inspection report, took photos, sent it over afterwards, talked to the listing agent and the seller, and they contested it. They said that there was no way that there was a leak in the roof because the roof was quote unquote brand new. So I called the town permit office to see when had permits been pulled for the roof to have been done that was quote unquote new. They had no record of it. So the seller had obviously either done it himself, hired somebody, never took out a permit, whatever. So there's no record of it. So we went back to the disclosures. The disclosures did not state the age of the roof. Now I can tell you from looking at it, it certainly looked newer, but I wouldn't call it new. So the type of roof they had, it came in like this at a point. And so at that point, there just had not been proper flashing or something like that. And that's what caused the drip run. Well, when we're in the bedroom, again, we're back up there and you see the staining. So the seller contested it. Seller said the roof was new, blah, blah, blah. So what ended up happening was we had to have a credit done because the seller refused to do the repair work. Buyer was okay with it. Buyer said, all right, we'll take the credit. We had a roofer go out. Roofer did estimates. We showed it to the seller. The seller agreed with the estimate, gave the credit. Credit was being issued at closing. Went through walkthrough. The stain was bigger. Buyer backed out.
Yeah.
So if there's a major item at inspection, we first try to negotiate it. We first try to say, okay, we know what the problem is. We see what the problem is. So we're going to get estimates on it. And in the case of roof, you always want to get third-party estimates. If it's a plumbing problem, you want to get third-party estimates. If it's not significant stuff, okay, insignificant stuff is like you on the inspection report, they note that there's no GFCI outlets in the kitchen and the bathroom where there should be. Yeah. Those are really minor things. They're not prohibitive to the purchase of the house. They don't generate a health or safety hazard or anything of that nature. Yes, technically they should be because it's near water, but if the house was built in 1950, they didn't do that then. The outs just need to be updated. Those are usually addressed through small credit amounts that are agreed upon between seller and buyer that go into the contract. And it just goes in as a credit of, say $500. Okay. But if it's major, actually, remember the guy who had the house that we helped him purchase where the basement, and he had to have the jacking done in the basement because it was a structural reference?
That was actually one of the ones I was thinking about. So
in that case, again, it was already pre-stated, though, in the listing that they knew of the issue and they already had a plan to have that corrected. So in that case, we knew, but it just took forever to get it done.
Yep.
But if you find something during inspection, it's going to be, again, if it's major, it's going to be handled with third-party estimates, and then the estimates get agreed upon between buyer and seller. The sellers are almost always going to opt not to do the work because they don't want to delay the closing. They want to just say, okay, I'm good with it. I'll take the loss on my proceeds coming out of the sale of the house, and it's all yours. And then the buyer, as long as it's not something that's going to adversely affect the purchase, where you, for example, would say, hang on, that's a health or safety hazard. You can't buy the house now.
Yep.
Then in those cases, we go through it. That's the only instance I've had where it got worse along the way. And so there was clearly a problem with the roof and the buyer backed out. Every other time that it's come up, I'll give you another example. I had a buyer who had, we determined issues with the fireplace. We knew it had to be completely relined because during the inspection, we did a second inspection on the chimney itself because they specifically wanted to make sure the fireplace was working. We found that the fireplace needed to be fully relined all the way down, and it had to be segregated to allow for the boiler. Well, in that case, we had an estimate done. It was about $11,000 and change. The seller agreed to the amount to be credited, but what they did was they pulled the money out of proceeds, put it into an escrow account to be held by the buyer's attorney. Buyer's attorney released the funds to the contractor once the work was completed. Well, because of weather, they didn't get the work completed for 9 months. So that money sat in escrow for 9 months.
Oh, that's fun.
So those are all the things, and that's what's on my plate. And this is where, people talk about, hey, I'm working with this real estate agent and they're showing me a house. It's like, yeah, that's the easy part of it.
Yep.
You get into inspections and issues come up. That's when we're all working. I mean, that's when me and that other agent, whether I'm listing it or I'm on the buyer side, it's back and forth. And we always try to explain to people, the inspection is for your information. It is for you to determine the health of the house if you want to purchase it, and then how to handle the items that are found during it. But if something major comes up, we always get estimates, and then we always negotiate. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So that's an interesting lead into a question that I get, because repairs are something that come up, and people go in and say, well, George, I saw this house and I think I could do the work. And I said, well, what kind of loan are you coming in with? Are you conventional or FHA? And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it depends upon how you're qualifying for the purchase. So what's the difference in qualification for conventional and FHA? Because some people think that they can use any loan and still purchase a house even if it needs work.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'll say that the base case difference when you're going to use one versus the other tends to be based off of your credit score. So
which you tanked during pulling multiple credit.
So
I couldn't resist.
I don't take them. So credit scores for conventional, they say that they'll go down, I think, to a 620, but the rates are so punishing at that level. And the mortgage insurance, if you need it, starts to get so high that we start to violate things like high price mortgage loan, high cost mortgage loan. We're only allowed to have a certain amount of, charges and fees and points that you're paying relative to the purchase price. So for most people, 680 and up is when we start thinking about conventional. So that means that for most other people, 680 and below is when we're talking more FHA. So I'm getting people still qualified and loans closed right now down to 600 credit scores. So that's your base case. Yeah, is I'd say 600 to 680. We're usually looking FHA. 680 and up is when we start to consider conventional. Now, as you said, there are other things that can come into play as well. If someone is looking at a multifamily, even if they have a high credit score, we might be looking at FHA because the terms are better. If it's a property that is not going to go FHA, as you point out, during some part of inspections, and they have the option to do either, we'll try to push conventional. So there are different scenarios where each works, but the base case is, do you even qualify to making a loan work with your credit score going conventional? I'll pull a rate and I'll pull a mortgage insurance quote and be able to say, this loan is probably just not going to work for you conventional. And you still have to pass an automated underwriting system as well that we run through. So even if you do fit conventional, you might not pass through that automated underwriting system.
So one of the things that there were a few things in there that you mentioned. And one of the things that I heard that I was thinking about a buyer, the difference in credit score, how far down you go or how far up you go before you start switching between the two. But then you were making a point about it may be better for them to consider a different loan product on a house after they've started moving ahead. And that would touch on the, if I'm starting out FHA and I flip to conventional, that's something we need to know up front, because at the end of the day, when we put in an offer, we have to declare the type of loan that it is.
Yep, exactly. And it's important because it changes how we're looking at the purchase. So pre-offer is when we need to have those discussions of, hopefully pre-offer, you've already gone and looked through the home. If not, you and the buyer, at least just you, and you can tell me, hey, Bill, there's peel and paint everywhere. There's, siding missing. There's knob and tube wiring. There's no chance that this is going FHA. And that's when we can say, okay, well, it might be painful, but can we make it work conventional? Maybe your payment would be higher conventional than it would be FHA. But those conversations are important to have up front for sure.
Okay. I am sitting here as we're talking, I'm making notes about some follow-ups on this, but we could just keep going down the loan difference type. So I think that's something we come back to again.
Yep.
And I think what we should do is we should take a specific house and we'll break it down to say, and we'll pick a house that maybe isn't perfect, but it's not fully distressed. Fully distressed house, that's where we're getting into foreclosures and other things. That's a totally different discussion. But if a house is multifamily is really probably the best example of this, because multifamilies tend to be built in the 1880s to 1920s. For the most part, they are original homes that just never really got fully updated. Most of them are in very densely packed urban areas, and those tend not to get the same level of attention that a single family does in the suburbs. I mean, it's unfortunate reality. Those are homes that a lot of people purchase, though, as a first-time buyer because they want to offset their mortgage.
Yep.
They want to collect some rent. They want to start building equity. They want to have an asset value. There's the other side of FHA, which is the 203K, which I think, again, we probably should come back to it another day.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
Because there's been that went quiet for a short period of time, and now those have come back. Lenders, banks, lenders, et cetera, are now starting to allow 203K criteria, even both streamlined and the full version. I know there's a difference there. Okay. I'm going to make a note here because that's one I want to come back to.
All right. Well, it's actually, again, these are all kind of leading into each other. My next one for you is, should I favor a home with city water and sewer connections, or is well and septic fine?
I mentioned to you I'm working with a couple out of California.
Mm-hmm.
So they're living in a gated community in LA. It's a newer build. They moved out there a period of time. So we met because they're moving here to Connecticut. We went through a number of things, and they were looking at me and they were pointing at this thing and they said, what's that? What's that? I said, well, that's the well pump head. And they looked at me and they're like, is there a bad pump head?
Exactly. Well, what?
So we had a conversation about well and septic versus city water and sewer. And how do I say this? To say that the reaction was, excuse me, what? Especially on the septic side. Septic is what throws everybody off more than well. So here's the difference. If you're coming from an area where you're used to city water sewer, it means that you're used to constant pressure on your water. It means that even if we lose power, you're used to still being able to flush the toilet. That's the difference between city water and well water. You can get into the organics. You can get into, whether there's well water contaminants. You can get into whether or not it's a dry well, if you have to frack the well. There's all those things that go into wells. But the fundamental difference is that if your way of living is I'm used to never having to question my water, then you probably are not going to be happy with a well water system because there's always maintenance on it. The beauty of it is that you own the water. Yep. You're not paying a water tax. You're not writing a check to the town for it, but you are maintaining that well. And by maintaining it means that you periodically should be testing it for organics. You should be having a water quality test done periodically. Periodically could be every few years. I know some people do it more frequently, but you should be doing it periodically. if you're in an area that has harder water. Now, you can get hard water even on city water.
Yep.
Okay. I think people have a misunderstanding of that. But in well water, it is more present because it's just mineral content. Well, then you need a filtration system. Maybe you're putting on a water softener, in which case then you kind of get that feeling on your fingers from that softener. It affects how you may wash your clothes. Okay. Most people on well systems don't put in irrigation systems on their lawns.
Yeah.
There was a house that we actually offered on recently for one of our clients, which had a combination of well and city water.
Huh.
They had converted over to city water, but they left the well intact and they left the well pump intact. And the reason why, they were using the well pump to water their lawns.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that makes sense.
That was all they used it for.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between well water. And again, if you're used to having water pressure all the time, you're probably going to be more happy with city water. But depending upon where you're looking, that may not even be close to being an option. Most houses so if you're running along an interstate, you're probably going to have city water sewer. But if you start to move in, okay, or you're into an elevation, you may find that you are well water and septic because they just couldn't get the infrastructure to that area. It was just too costly and prohibitive for the town to run lines all the way up through. Sewer line builds and sewer connections are expensive for a town. That's what you pay taxes for. From a sewer perspective, I think that's less of a concern. I think people, get caught up in the idea of a septic system. Oh my God, it's so costly. Well, a well-maintained septic system, if you talk to a septic guy, they'll tell you a well-maintained septic system that is pumped out with frequency and does not get anything other than human waste in it, does not get, heavy, paper products and all that jammed down it, will probably last you between 60 and 70 years.
Yeah.
You have some that can last longer, but you probably need to be thinking about it in that 60, 70 year range. So if you are looking at a house that was built in 1940 and has a septic system, a septic inspection is going to be crucial because you're going to need to find out. I'm almost willing to bet that at this point in time in 2022, most homes that have been built prior to 1950 on a septic system have probably had a replacement on some level done, whether that was the leach field, the chambers, the tank, whatever it may be. But the biggest difference between septic and city sewer is that septic has to be maintained by the buyer. Like a well system has to be tested periodically, a septic system should be pumped out with frequency. If you have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that's on septic and you're the only person living there, you're probably not going to pump it out more than every 3 years. You just, unless you're holding parties every weekend or something, Actually, I'm going to give you an example. There was a gentleman that you and I worked with in Hamden. He bought a house in Hamden about 2 years ago. I can't give his name.
Yep. No, I think I know which one you're talking about.
So anyway, his first name begins with an S.
Yep.
So the septic system on that house was sized appropriate at the time that it was built as a technical 4-bedroom, but the tank was smaller to current code requirements. All right. Now, we had everything set that we'd had the pump out done. Okay. In that case, I was representing both buyer and seller. So I was acting as dual. And I spoke to the sellers. I said, you're going to need to have the tank pump. And they said, well, we just had it done. Do we really need to do it again? I said, yeah, it has to be dry at time of inspection. So they said, well, okay, well, we'll get that done. We'll figure it out. They didn't get it done. And the weekend before the inspection, they held a party for a wedding.
Oh.
And 80 people were there.
Oh.
That tank was overflowing. So the problem with the inspection was that at the time of inspection, the buyer looked at me and goes, is there a problem? He's like, because the inspector's saying, oh my God, look at all the way. When did they last pump this? I'm going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
There's 2 people that live here. It's been 2 people living here for the better part of the last 8 years. Their kids are gone. It had the wedding. We all forgot about it. So septic, the difference between city water sewer is, I would say, no maintenance, consistency of pressure, just kind of a flush it and forget it kind of mindset. Okay. With well water and septic, it is something you maintain, but you're not paying taxes to the town for the use of those. You pay taxes to the town for your water and sewer. Granted, it's nominal, but it's still money you're paying every year.
Yep.
So that would be the 2 major differences.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking at the clock here. You want to jump into one more set of questions?
Yeah, I have time for that.
All right, I got one more I want to throw to you. All right. So this is actually, here we go. So there's a young lady we're both working with. She's looking to buy multifamily, and her father is talking about giving her a hand. And so the question came up with, hey, George, I may need help at closing. Can I just go to blank and get money for at closing? And this is when we got into the conversation about the timing of funds, use of funds, clearing of funds, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a few different ways you can get help during a transaction. One of them, which we've talked about before, is seller credits. There are limits on those based off of the loan type, based off of how much you're putting down. But you can always get gifts as well. Gifts have to come from family members or a family-like relationship, which is kind of difficult to document. I haven't had a great experience so far getting those family-like relationships approved for gift funds.
What's a family-like relationship?
You grew up next to Stevie. And
so
Stevie, yeah, Stevie's been at your house and you've been at Stevie's house forever. And you guys have been friends for 40 years. Your family vacations together. You guys went to college together. You know, like there is a family-like relationship there. Those are some instances where, you know, by the guidelines, a gift would be allowed. But again, terribly difficult to document that and get that approved. So just the best thing you can think of is it's got to be from a direct family member, mother, sister, father, brother, uncle, you know, grandfather, that kind of thing. There are no real limits on that. When you're purchasing a multifamily, there can be some limits where a certain percentage of the down payment has to come out of your funds. So there are some programs and some purchases where you have to provide 2 to 3% of the down payment, let's say, and they can provide 60%. That's fine, but you must provide a certain percentage on some transactions. So it's very important to talk about all that, you know, up front. But yeah, as long as it's a family member, you know, have at it.
What about timing?
Timing is as soon as possible. You know, so when it comes to the documentation required, a little different between loan types. FHA, we will need the donor's bank statement, full bank statement, showing that the money's coming out. That right there, some people aren't comfortable with, because what we need to see is that you didn't just channel money through, you know, your father, let's say, that you got from a friend. So we need to see that the money was in their account already. We need to see that the money left their account by way of check or wire transfer. You need to have a copy of the check, copy of the wire transfer. You need to get your bank statement showing that the money went into it. Or it can also be sent to the attorney directly. So there's a few different ways we could structure that, but it's not as simple as just, hey, yeah, that 60 grand that just went into my bank account, that's from my uncle, John. You know, there's documentation. So again, talk about it early and often, and I will give you instructions depending on the loan type on how I need it written up and the best way to do it.
All right. So I got a scenario for you. This was for a buyer I had who you did not work with. They went down the path of getting gift monies and pretty much everything you just described. They actually had it taken care of early on. But I think it was right when, or so CD is closing disclosure get issued, then clear to close gets issued.
Yes, you're right there.
They fell short on funds at closing, and I can't remember what the cause of it was. It was a legitimate issue, and they had somebody, quote unquote, hand them money, not literally, but hand them money.
Yeah.
Before I go to what the outcome of that, because it's not as relevant, but you know, moments like that they're not common by any stretch, but they're not rare either.
No.
People run into, you know, getting up to closing and something has come up that's costing more money.
There's oil in the tank that there's a lot of oil in there that you didn't expect.
So the seller put in 275 gallons of oil and you're getting charged market rate at $3 and change. And so now you got an $800 oil bill that you didn't know about. Yeah. You don't have the $800 ready to go.
Attorney had to do an extra, you know, bit of title work to clear it. You know, all that stuff can happen and it can add. Yeah, when we're tight, you know, raise within margins, an extra $300 can do it. And if somebody just hands you money and you're trying to say that, oh, I just got this money in my bank account, probably not going to be looked upon too favorably by underwriting. There are some limits for cash deposits. Depends on the loan program, depends on how much money you make typically, where we could say, oh, or that $200 or $300 was just mattress money that I had. Sometimes that's allowed. Coming into closing like that, it might be looked upon a little sketchily by underwriting. But the best thing you can do is to just get it documented the right way from, mother, father, sister, or someone, and just, hey, I need $300 or $400. Can you do a gift letter? Can we do the transfer? In that instance, when you're so close to closing, I would have them send it directly to the attorney so that we don't have to document the check.
I was just going to say, what we did was we took the funds to the attorney applied it. We did have a letter with the lender took the letter from, I don't remember the family relationship, but he took the letter, they acknowledged it, the money went directly to the attorney.
Yep.
And the lender kind of gave him hey, that's not really what we want, but okay, because it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was a shortfall for them. Like you said, a few $100 as an example. I think it was the oil was the issue. But yeah, I've only had that come up a couple of times where somebody came up short at closing. But the timing of the gift funds has always been something that a lot of people just don't understand. They think that you can just wait until, a week before and then somebody's going to give you money. And it's not that they can't, but it just puts more risk into the conversation about how your underwriting group, for example, if it was you guys, would see that transaction. Because there's a gentleman that you and I worked with who used to walk around with a bag of cash. And no,
not okay.
I will never forget that moment when he said to me, I got the down payment in my car here. I'm sorry, you what?
Right.
Yeah, who do I give that to?
Yeah, in this paper bag. Yeah, so no.
And
those things do come up.
He legitimately had the money, and he was legitimate with his money. But
season it. Go put it in a bank account and season it. That's a whole nother discussion. All right. My last one for you.
Shoot.
Why can't we just put multiple offers in on multiple properties at once and we get to pick? If we get, a few of them accepted, great. We'll pick which one we want.
Oh, man, that is a loaded question. I'm going to go so far as to say that off the top of my head, I am 99.99999% sure there is no law against submission of multiple offers. There's nothing that says you can't do that. As a buyer, as an agent, you hate to even have that conversation because you're creating so much risk. Now, when you're in a market where inventory is a challenge, people go to that mindset and they say, well, we saw these three houses. We really like all three. George, we want to play it safe and put an offer in on all three just in case. Now, here's the problem. If we've put in an offer and remember, an offer is an intent to purchase. If we've put in an offer and the seller accepts it, I don't get a phone call saying, congratulations, we're sellers going forward with it. We're so happy and we're going to sign this. We're going to do that. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. And by the way, we should get that to you, in about 6 or 7 hours. And then I call the buyer and go, guess what? You got that one. And then I get another call from a seller that says, hey, guess what? No, I get back a document executed with initials on it and signatures saying, congratulations. Normally that happens within about a half an hour of me getting a call or a text message from the seller's agent saying, hey, we've decided to go ahead with your offer. We're sending everything over in the next half hour. Well, if that's the case, I now need to call up those other agents if we haven't heard back from them and say, hey, we retract our offer. All right. This is why it's a bad idea. Because as an agent, you're out there knowingly presenting multiple offers on multiple properties for the same buyer. And that, again, I don't think there's a law against it, but it certainly breaks the code of ethics and general compliance that you want to maintain to keep your license intact.
Yep.
Representing a buyer, you should be focusing them on making a purchase on a house that they feel is the right house. And if it's not the right house and they don't get it and they couldn't offer on the other ones, well, okay, that does happen. But this isn't a game. This isn't let me go out there and just kind of throw a bunch around and see what sticks. I know agents that do that. And I'll just say that when I see their names come across, if I'm the listing agent, I wonder every single time, are they just going to retract this offer on me? because I know agents that do it and they end up calling up and canceling. And that's where you have a buyer's agent come in and says, well, the buyer got cold feet. Well, as a listing agent, the first thing you say is why? What caused them to get cold feet? They didn't offer excessively over list price. Matter of fact, they offered list price. They're getting credits back. What caused them to get cold feet? Yeah. Right away. It's because they have an offer on another house that they wanted more so. Yeah. So it is strongly discouraged. It's just bad practice. It's not professional. It gives everybody it just makes everybody's stomach upset at the idea of having to place a phone call that says, hey, listen, we got to retract our offer. Now, if you've put in an offer, I will say this. I have had clients where on a Monday, we've looked at a house and said, we're going to put in this offer because we know we're going to get an answer back by Wednesday morning. And then on Tuesday afternoon, we see another house. We say, okay, let's write up this offer. We're going to put it here on the desk. We're going to have everything written to go so that if we get the answer back Wednesday morning that we didn't get it, we can just submit this one. I'll prepare multiple offers and I'll submit those offers in sequence once we have decisions on an existing offer that we have out there. But in no way, shape, or form do we flood and say we're going to put offers out all at the same time, because again, that's just bad practice. I had an agent call me up and say, George, my buyer really loves this property, but they already have an offer they're waiting to hear back on. I said, okay, I appreciate the heads up. So what do you want to do? She said, well, I just want, can I send you this and have you hold it for a second, but don't consider it as a legitimate offer until I call you back? I said, okay. I said, I'm good with that. That's good communication. So I'll just leave it in my email. I won't present it to the seller yet. I said, I'll give you 6 hours before I have to present to the seller. Because technically I am required to present it as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. She said, okay, understood. We're going to actually know this afternoon. I don't even think it was 3 hours by. She called me up. She goes, go ahead and submit the offer. We're good.
Perfect.
So again, in that case, there's no law prohibiting it. Is it good practice? If you're not communicating with each other, then you're certainly going to create agita. In that case, she did a very good job of just giving me a heads up and saying, we already have an offer out there. We don't know. I want to get this in front of you. Here's what the offer would be. I understand you need to, and I told her, I said, we're not reviewing offers until this evening anyway. So I just will hold on to it until you tell me it's okay to submit it. And if you tell me it's not, then I won't submit it. So yeah, we hate the idea of submitting multiple offers at the same time. Again, I got to go and look and see. I don't think there's anything that there's a law. It certainly is not ethical and compliant.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably, I would call it a gray area for me as well, because as you said, you're submitting an intent to purchase. I would say that I would probably technically have to be approving you for the ability to purchase all of the 3, 4, 2 houses that you're putting offers in at once, right?
That's a great point, because most pre-approval letters aren't written as blank letters.
Correct.
They at least have the town of reference on them. Maybe they don't have the specific address, but they at least have the town of reference. I've only had one buyer ever, the lender they were working with, it was an institutional bank, and they gave me what was literally just a generic pre-approval. And they said, don't worry about where it is. Don't worry about what it is. Just go ahead and give this letter out.
Have at it.
Have at it. And yeah, they can go up to, I don't know, pick a number. You want to go up to $500,000? We'll go up to $500,000. Sure, here you go. They just got to be able to put 10% down, and they're good for it. We're not worried about it. Wow, you've really done a diligent review of this buyer. Okay, cool. I am not looking forward to working with you as a lender. I'll never forget. That's the only time that I've been given a quote unquote blank pre-approval, and that I was antsy as anything going on with that one.
I'd give you one for Elon Musk, maybe. Looks like he can pretty much purchase whatever he wants.
Did you see what happened with Tesla shares?
Oh, yeah.
They took a beating.
Yeah, it's not good for him.
No, it's just because it's going to be – he actually – just to digress for 1 second, he actually created the very thing that Jack Dorsey was accused of doing and had to change, which was being the CEO of multiple entities at the same time in distraction. And so Tesla is bored right now, and the shareholders are saying, hang on a second, this Twitter thing's not a small deal. That's going to soak up a ton of your time. Wait a second, Tesla's on the verge of finally starting to produce at volume here. Yeah. Hang on. We were okay with space, and you chasing space programs, but
Elon spent too much time on Twitter before he owned it. And now he owns it.
I'll make the statement. I'm happy he's buying it. Hey, look, if Bezos can buy the Washington Post, why can't Elon Musk buy Twitter?
Yep. See what he does with it.
You got it. All right, we've got a bunch of other questions. I actually wrote notes for some new questions, just things that you brought up. I'll connect with you later on, and we'll just take it from there. But thank you for taking the time.
Sounds like a plan. Talk to you later, George. Take care.
Right. Hey, listen, I'll see you.
Yep. Bye.